you don't have to be experienced in fashion to feel what's, the electricity, the magic of the place when you come to us.
Yeah.
Because you see it. Beauty is beauty.
The fashion business is very punishing. It's sort of
really,
relentless.
Yes, definitely. No, it's really, really hard.
So around 2012, I show up in your life.
Yes, I remember that.
So let's talk about this.
What is my daughter doing? I cannot believe it. I started to look in the internet who you were, and that became even worse.
Gilles Mendel, welcome to The Magnificent Others. So full disclosure, you are my father-in-law. So we have to get that out of the way first. How do you feel about that? No, just wait. We'll get to that.
Okay.
Sarah Jessica Parker, Taylor Swift, J-Lo, Celine Dion, Michelle Obama, Melania Trump, Nancy Reagan, Liza Minnelli, Anna Kendrick, Heidi Klum, Claire Danes, Scarlett Johansson, Kerry Washington, Sandra Bullock. These are just some of the beautiful women that you've dressed through the years, being in the fashion business.
Yeah, it's been quite an incredible experience, I have to say. It's just, I can't believe. In fact, I'm happy you gave that list, because I was afraid you were going to ask me who did I dress. I would have never got to that point.
Did I leave anyone off the list?
Anna Kendrick, Nicole Kidman.
Oh, okay.
But no, but more or less, there's so many through the years.
So, but I felt like we needed to start there because they were family, but also
Thank you.
People that wouldn't necessarily, if they know you're a fashion designer, they wouldn't necessarily know the arc of accomplishment. As you know, in American culture, you're judged by the level of celebrity that you reach. And
yeah, as I said, it's quite an experience. I have to say, I just saw recently, a documentary on Ferragamo, the shoemaker, and he was talking, the experience was the same, from the love of a product, the love of making something beautiful, from the understanding. He came to America, and he basically dressed all these big celebrities as well. And it was the same principles, the principle of loving making the product, the respect of the material. This whole love into the artisany, which is basically what I come from, this mastery of artisan that's proud of their work. This is like what the fire was behind my experiences.
So my aspiration in interviewing you, and the reason I asked you, is because most people really don't understand the fashion business. They have a sort of celebrity tinged hue of what it's like, but obviously because we've been family for many years now, I have an insider view, and I realize in talking to people in my life, most people really don't understand the grind of the fashion business and and it starts with the love. But we'll get there for a second. But I want to get into your background a bit, if you don't mind. So, you were born in post-war France, 1955.
Yes.
5155. Is that?
Yes.
Lucky numbers, right?
Yes.
What are your memories of post-war France? Because Paris obviously famously was not bombed.
No. I grew up, I grew up in an area in Paris called Neuilly, which is a little wood of Boulogne. In fact, I was born at the American Hospital in Paris, which is the American Hospital. Who do know that?
I didn't know
later
that.
on, here I am, in America. I grew up surrounded by, obviously, my parents that had, such tremendous experience with the war and so on. So it was, during my whole youth, they tried not to impose in me, what they went through. Even my I have not been religiously educated in any way. It was very free, because they really suffered enormously. My mom went, through a terrible concentration camp. I just read recently that, in Drancy, where she was staying, where she stood during the war, 70,000 people went in and only 2,000 went out. And she was one of them. So it's like incredible. And, to date, unfortunately, she passed away, but till the last moment, she really never really wanted to talk about it. It was such a trauma. You could imagine.
I can't.
Just can't imagine.
I think it's almost unimaginable.
Unimaginable.
What people went through.
Incredible. And my dad, the same thing. His story is incredible. This man was a man of multi-talented, but he grew up as a furrier because he was, in the Jewish family, the first son, the first boy, he tries to become a doctor. They try to give him an education. The second, my dad had to go and work with the family. That's how it is. So from the age of 6, 7 years old, he was already starting to work and help, the mother and my grandfather, as a furrier, to do things. And so during the war, which is crazy if you think of it, first of all, should I talk about that for a minute?
It's right here. I
Okay,
wanted to talk
okay.
about it. So you're doing it for me, yeah.
Okay. It's insane. This is a man who was barely educated for a long time. He was really purely educated as a master furrier. He learned from my grandfather, the trade and so on. But when he was in his 20s, you would think that how do you, the war started, and what makes you fight and become a part of the resistance? You would think. Well, he wrote a book, my dad, after a while, and in his book he says that basically the story was that he fell in love with a girl, and that girl happened to be in the resistance. And the next day, he wanted so badly to date her that she took him one day and he said, "Okay, come over. We have something. We're going to go and bomb a bridge." And he was suddenly in a car with a grenade between his legs, going, to bomb the bridge where the Germans were coming. And that's how he started the war. Then the Germans, obviously after that, the Gestapo, were searching for him. And he went for 1 year in the south of France, hidden in a little farm, where he couldn't get out. He had to hide because, they were looking for him. So the only time he could get out maybe is at nighttime a little bit. But anyway, so he started to read. And he read everything he could find, right? So until that moment, since I know my dad, till his last breath, he would send me first, faxes before the emails, but he would send me faxes and stories, and he could never talk to me without poetry. He would write. It was always beautiful. He wouldn't say to me, "Gilles, maybe today you should do this, in work, or you should, I advise you to do that." No, he would come with maybe a poem from Baudelaire or something. He would come out with, it was insane. The man was kind of a special guy.
Is it true he was decorated after the war by Mitterrand and
yeah, well, he got
a resistance fighter?
He got a medal. Yes, he was decorated, and yeah. But
and
anyway.
Talk a little bit about how your parents met, because it's this unlikely sort of meeting.
How they met, I'm not sure. They met through family. It's in those days, my mother had many brothers, and they had, when you had to meet, if you met my dad, in order to meet her, had to meet all the brothers. She couldn't go out without the 6 brothers behind her going. Well, they met in Paris. That's where they met, and during the war, after the war, they just met right after the war. But nothing. I don't think there was anything particularly.
I thought your daughter had told me a story that involves something a little bit more poetic, like a movie scene.
Oh, really? No, I don't recall that. No.
Well, we blame her for giving me the wrong information. So you're the 5th generation of your family,
yes, that
entered what we would loosely call the fashion business, but it was really the furrier business.
Yes. Yeah, from 1870, in Lenin, from Nicholas II, where I'm sure they had, the Jews were, as during that time in the late 19th century, they were kind of segregated in some areas of Russia. It was, I think it was called the Pale Settlement. It was an area between Belarus and Ukraine. And, there was an area where they could live. And if they had special skill of some sort, you would be able to go to Leningrad and eventually, do things like my great-grandfather was doing, for the Tsar. He could make fur. He could do, he had this extraordinary talent and artistry. He brought to there, the knowledge of making of all the making of the fur, the artisany. He had his technical skill were very high, and I think that's why, because of his skill, he was able, to start.
Can you define what that skill would have been in the late 1800s? What?
Oh, well, the skill was really, it's to make a fur coat, if you think of it, it's very, very complicated and very artistic effort because, I don't want to be too literal, but, there's a lot of cutting, a lot of symmetrical things. You have to understand an animal doesn't have, the same character from the neck to the bottom of his the skin the hair has a different. So in order to make a garment very uniform, you have to really understand on the leather side, how to cut the skins to make it right. So there is a huge amount of technical knowledge that in those days, was required. And my great grandfather, got this from his trade. I mean, the Jewish people, I think the fur trade comes from hundreds and hundreds of years, so it's I think he was highly skilled. He was extremely skilled. And when my grandfather left after the revolution, this Russian area, and came to France, he brought with him his knowledge, his technical knowledge, and that's how he started to build something in Paris.
What economic situation were your parents in when you were young? Were they poor, or were they sort of middle class, or?
They were middle class, maybe a little bit better than middle class. I mean, my father would come home at night and continue to do his work, watching television, at home in front of the TV, but still trying to make up a little bit so he could the next day have already advanced his work. He had an atelier. Originally, when I was little, my dad had a beautiful little shop, but with an atelier with one sewer, and he was making. I mean, those days there was maybe 4 or 5 styles, that he would offer to the clients, and they were all bespoke pieces. Basically, every time somebody would come, he would make them for a customer.
Yeah.
And but from him, I learned. And when I was little, I would go to the workshop, and I, smelled, the workshop and all this, the noise of the machine. And I would look at this man who was very handsome with, long hands, a little diamond ring. And I would look at him nailing the skins on a board. And, it would be like looking at the architecture of Versailles, the gardens of Versailles. All these skins were laid out on the board, and he had like all nails and a tool that maybe belonged to his father, femme old tool, and he would do nail by nail, stretching the skin, wetting the skin, stretching the skin on a board. And at the end, it would be immaculate. It was like, I mean, as I said, like a plan of Paris. It was very beautiful. So, I mean, I saw him doing that for many years, till one day he moved to Rue Saint-Honoré in Paris. And it was a time, my mother was very, very, very visionary, and she knew that this man was so talented. He needed to be more exposed to the world of fashion and so on. And Rue Saint-Honoré was the street, and is still the street in Paris to be in.
So it was your mother that sort of pushed?
My mother, yes. She was the one who really put. My dad would have stayed where he was. He was very happy.
Was her vision that he could sort of elevate himself in the fashion folk world? And
I don't think up to that time there was you talking so much. I mean, fashion. I think I have been more the one who brought more even this idea of fashion to the world. I mean, that embraced more the fashion element. My dad looked at himself like
like a craftsman,
craftsman who was making unbelievable things. He didn't need to do quantities. He didn't want to do anything that was beyond the artistry of his work, and he was very proud of it. And there was something. My mom was the one pushing and saying, we should try to do more, to be more involved. You're so talented. You have so much to offer. Why don't you why don't you show that to more people?
I see.
And I was the instrument of that, basically. When I decided to move into my family's world, in the work world, I'm the one who instigated, the connection with designers, because my mother was basically this little bundle of beauty who was always constantly, I would be one day in Paris, and she would arrive in a little Mini Cooper with, a famous designer next to her, like Azin Alaya. And she had many very famous designers around her that loved her. And it was not about the spending of the money, or it was more because she was very charismatic. She loved to dress. And she really was so inspiring. And she's definitely one of my best inspiration.
Yeah, when we were last in Paris, your daughter and I, we went to the Elia Museum.
Yes.
And she was talking about, imagine my grandmother used to come here.
Yes. Yeah, and I went when I was little. She would take me to the atelier of Alaya, and but she was incredible. She really introduced me to that, and when I was at that age, younger, I would go to their atelier, and that's how I discovered, in fact, completely fashion, because I saw those designers in the and I saw their collections, and I saw those assistants sketching for them, and I was looking at those fittings with clothes that felt like surreal to me. So looking at my dad, who was making this most immaculate, beautiful product, but one of a kind every time, and seeing those guys, exploring, the infinity of beauty, really raising definitely inspire me to
at that
to do
point
what
in
I've
your
done.
life, like let's say your late teens. Mm-hmm. Is your idea you're going to follow your father into the family trade, or you're going to do something different?
Yeah, I never really thought I would follow my father's, steps and continue developing it. But I somehow, I did a business school. I was not too good in business school. I knew I cheat pretty well. So
in business school, it just makes me laugh.
Yeah, thank you very much. So, believe it or not, during that time, I was trying to keep going by playing music. I had a band I was playing. I had a band called Silver Hill.
Silver Hill.
All right. Ask me why, I have no idea. But anyway, I was trying to escape from school as much as I could, So I traveled a lot. While I was at school, I, even traveled to Guatemala. I discovered...
We're getting to Guatemala.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But, I did some travel. But when I came back to Paris and I tried to be a businessman, my best friend his dad was a very famous guy who was, buying grains and selling grains, all over the world, and hedging his buys at the Chicago Trade, World Trade. Anyway, I was doing all that, and I said, Gilles, what are you doing? This is not right. And I was always I drew always very well. That's something that I naturally had in me. And my mom was such an inspiration to me. And and by discovering those designers and so on, it really pushed me to say, you know what? I'm going to try to take this little jewel box of my father, and instead of saying that I'm coming in, I would have, because I knew right away that I could never be the master that he was. That mastery was impossible, but I could bring something he didn't have. So I said I used my mom's connections, and I introduced the first few months when I decided to work with him. I said, look, I come in, but let me bring designs. Let me bring a designer, a famous designer, to do a collection with you, and maybe we'll go from there. So we had the first designer was Jean-Charles de Castelbajac, which is, someone very renowned in France. And we did a collection. We did a runway show. And it went very well. My father was very happy. We got suddenly press all over the place. We were in L'Officiel, Vogue. It was incredible. And then I said, what do I do? And, I couldn't be in the shadow of this huge tree of my father. It was impossible. I could have never be myself. So for some reason, I decided out of the blue, without any kind of preparation, I said, I'm going to go to America. I had a sketchbook of ideas that I wanted to design, I had some ideas, but I was not really totally prepared. So I'm going to go to America, and maybe I'm opening a store on Madison Avenue. Why not? So I went on a tourist visa to New York, and I walked the streets of Madison up and down. It was the, early 80s. Everybody at that time already, you had, all the stores with all the first stores disappeared at this point. In the early 80s in New York City, you already had a lot of anti-fur movements, posters about, I'd rather be naked than wearing fur and all these things. So it was not like too good. But anyway, I realized very quickly that a store on Madison was not going to happen because you had to have $300,000-$400,000 in those days, to spend. It was already like kind of $1 million that I didn't have. Neither my parents were going to invest in this kid coming to New York after just a few months having worked with my dad. And, I went on and on and on. And, I realized, and I said, okay, I'm going to go to Bergdorf Goodman, the store. I happened to have to be connected because some public relation in Paris that I knew said, why don't you go and see Dawn Mello, who at the time was running Bergdorf Goodman. I showed my sketch and she very nicely, politely said to me, thank you, but, maybe go to the second floor. There is a fur department. It's Fendi. You could talk to the gentleman there and maybe, so I went downstairs and the gentleman very nicely said, yes, but thank you, but goodbye. So I literally 2-3 days before I had to go back to Paris, I go to this restaurant, which was in the fur district in New York, which in those days was so colorful, a lot of little Jewish restaurants in corner streets and so on. And there was one called Traders. And it was like a saloon, Billy. You go in, the doors would open like this. You go in and the women would passing by, with, pastrami sandwiches and gefilte fish and whatever. And I'm sitting there with the broker of my father who was buying the skins. And I said, Alvin, I'm going back. I can't find anything. And the man introduced me. He said, let me talk. A gentleman passed by in front of the door, in front of us, and said, meet Gilles and so on. And the man said to me, maybe you should go back up. There is a place called Elizabeth Arden on Fifth Avenue. And there's a gentleman there. His name is Jerry Solovay. And if you go, you'll see on the second floor, they sell fashion. But the mannequins are a little bit like this, they're not too, it's not really doing so well. Maybe you never know. You go and talk to them. I'll go short. I went up there. I met Jerry Solovay. I saw this incredible second floor parlor room on Fifth Avenue. I was shaking. And believe it or not, we connected. He took me to meet Joe Ronchetti, the president of Elizabeth Arden in those days, a day later. And on a shake hand, I swear, on a shake hand, without contract, 20% on sales, he said to me, you can have a little room on the second floor in the parlor room. And we have 13 locations all over America. If you like, you could travel and do your thing. And I became, the Frenchman with his strong cases, meeting the who's who of America.
Yeah.
That's made me start going back to the beginning, how I got to...
because we skipped over this one thing.
Sorry.
It's a very interesting story.
Sorry.
So talk about why did you decide to go to Guatemala somewhere in this? It's a little before this, but it's generally the same time period.
Yeah.
Tell that story.
Guatemala was a different story. I wanted to discover America. I wanted to go.
Why Guatemala?
Guatemala was purely because I wanted to go. The first trip I went in America, I went all the way to California. I remember. I thought I was going to go to California, take Route 60 down the coast, and go to Mexico. I speak fluently Spanish. And I thought, Gilles, let's go to Mexico. It's going to be fun. I was still, I travel in buses, youth hostels, whatever. And when I went down I passed by Tijuana and I went back to Mexico, I got really, scared. I thought, this is not really for me. The city was very crowded. Everything was not my thing. And I said, maybe I should continue. It's not too far. I'm going to go to the next frontier, which is Guatemala. And I went literally out of the blue. I remember I crossed the frontier by foot. To tell you how not prepared I had. I had just a little knapsack with my toothbrush, no camera, nothing, no drugs. I was really completely in a mood of discovering something that I've never experienced in Europe. I don't even understand to date how my parents let me do that. It was insane because it was not a time of telephone, cell phones or anything.
Yeah.
And the moment I stepped in Guatemala in those days, for some reason, I felt totally at ease. The people were beautiful. They were dressed in those multicolors pajama outfits, the bags, the banana bags in multicolors. I loved it. And, we went into buses that had another engine in the bus. And, we would go in the jungle and I had these people sitting on my knees with the chickens. But it was such an extraordinary experience. And I was lucky. The reason I stayed there longer than expected was because I discovered on the lake of Atitlan, there's a Atitlan volcanic area, and there's a lake. And when I went, it's a beautiful area, and I met this chief of a tribe there, and right on the beach, and we became friends, and he took me to all those little villages, and the fact that I was not coming with cameras, I was not coming with kind of I was not like a tourist. I wanted to blend. I think I was searching for something, and I found it there, and I loved it. I felt there was no more judgment. I was not the son of a furrier. I was not I was just an in-person dealing with beautiful, loving, extraordinary people. And but my trip had to get cut short because I was mosquitoes love me, and my feet were like completely destroyed by mosquito bites. And in the jungle it gets very the humidity and so on, you cannot really, it was getting infected, so I had to go back. And on my return, may I tell you a quick story?
I want you to tell the whole arc of the story.
On my return, I go back and I make a mistake, so I had to fly back to Guatemala City right away. My feet were impossible, and so I had to take a flight back and back to Paris. And on my return, I made a mistake, or somehow I had to stop in Boston. And I've never been to Boston. In fact, I've never been to Boston since. So to tell you, I'm telling you a story that I remember from then. So I arrived at the airport in Boston, and it was nighttime. So I said, what do? I said, I should go to see Cambridge University, since the next flight to Paris was the following day at night. I had one day to kill. So I said, it was 2 a.m. So I said, how do I go? Because Cambridge University reminded me of my university, because I went to a business school, which was also kind of a tough school to get in. Very similar campus, whatever. So I remember I took a train over the city. I arrived there and I fell asleep on the grass at 4 or 5 a.m. 5 a.m. I didn't know where I was. And
you were still
anyway,
in Guatemala.
I was still in Guatemala, literally curly hair up to my, long curly hair. I had a banana bag from Guatemala. So I look, and I was very dark. And I'm sleeping on the grass, somewhere there. And there's a gentleman, an old man with a beard and a pipe, pushed me, he says, hey, where are you coming from? And I look up and I said, well, I tell my story. And the man happened to be an old teacher of Harvard who, kind of became friendly with me and said to me, well, how long have you been traveling? And I said, I've been traveling for the past 3 months. Have you read a paper recently? I said, no, in fact, I've been a little bit out of everything for the past 3 months. Anyway, he took me to the library. He showed me the first Gutenberg book printed. It was insane. And, I spent the day with this gentleman. He gave me this whole tour of Harvard, and I went back to Paris. It was great.
Beautiful story. So you're in New York. You have this deal with Elizabeth Arden.
Yes.
You're strictly focused on making furs because that's your...
Yes and no, because, the whole principle of... my whole principle was, at those days, you had furriers. The furriers, it's like you go to a store in those days and you had like fur coats. That was not my thing. Me, I wanted to show the artistry of making fur with fabric and transforming, really making more fashion out of it.
Yeah.
I was not searching just to do a fur coat. So my store was, there was a lot of cashmere, there was a lot of fabric mix, capes and so on. So when you came to my store at Elizabeth Arden, you felt like you were in a fashion salon, even though primarily it was fur, but there was a lot of other things that matched together. And, so yeah, when I started at Elizabeth Arden, that's how I presented myself. And
what was your impression of New York at that time? This is late 80s?
Yes.
Mid 80s?
Early 80s, mid 80s. New York was extraordinary. I mean, it was fun. It was incredibly, for me, it was such a extraordinary to experience, the uptown, downtown mix. I was living, I was, in one hand, I would be making a coat for Brooke Astor. At the same time, I would be having dinner with Keith Haring downtown. I mean, something totally surreal.
Yeah, you were friends with Keith Haring, and also you hung out in Warhol's circle.
Yes. I mean, without knowing really where I was, I mean, that was beyond my education, I think in those days, I was this little Jewish kid coming from Paris, sheltered by my parents, even though I went to Guatemala. But, when I always remember going to the factory and having lunch with Andy Warhol, who was, in those days, I wanted to be in the Interview magazine and so on. And I remember my whole experience with him, I didn't understand a single word. Because he was mumbling the way he was talking, and I couldn't understand anything. I think I left. I didn't know what happened, but I was watching around. It was fabulous. I saw how he was printing his work,
Sure.
and it was, but yeah.
I remember you telling me once that Keith Haring offered you a something of his, and you turned him down.
Yeah, turned me down. I didn't know because there was a lot of people around him, around this crowd. There was a lot of people who were taking advantage of his work. I always had a friend. There was a lot of drugs, even though I was not into drugs, but a lot of cocaine. In those days, it was people where the nightlife and the art world was mixed with the uptown world, and it was interesting for that reason. At the same time, a lot of parasite around these artists, and and I had my thing. I was doing fashion. I was developing something I loved, and I loved to mingle with them. But I never really fully understood in those days the value of taking a piece of Keith Haring's work, and so on.
Did you chart your success now that you're in this? You're immersed in this world. Like, did you feel you were successful right away? Did it take a while to find a clientele? Like, walk me through that a little bit.
Yeah, it was a slow success, a slow growth, but it's Elizabeth Arden was such an extraordinary experience for me because imagine the who's who of America was going to Elizabeth Arden for their hair done. There was a hair salon in every, the people were, it was a beauty place. You would go on the red door on Fifth Avenue, and the women were like pampered. So basically, from the Marshall family, I mean, the names, you gave me the list of all the celebrities, but, there's a lot of people who were not celebrities, but very well-known people in the world of politics and so on, who were, going to Elizabeth Arden. So I had very quickly instant recognition and success because I would travel to all these stores, from Rodeo Drive to the best locations, bring my trunk cases with my little cashmere trim coats and all that thing. And I was starting to dress really the who's who of America. So basically, the growth went slowly, but enough to allow myself after a few years to open finally my store on Madison Avenue. So, even though, and I have to say it's a record because if you think of it, I think I stayed about 10 years at Elizabeth Arden. And there was really difficult years where fur was really, really hard, when, nobody wanted to be associated with this idea of fur. I was in a cosmetic company who had so much more to lose than me. And they kept me all along because I was successful. I was really doing well for them.
Yeah.
So it shows you that there was there was a very good partnership.
Yeah. I think because fur is still a hot button topic. It's still being debated in American culture, and you no longer are involved in fur.
No.
So I think people would need to know that, because why we're talking so casually about it. It's not callous, because I know one of the first discussions you and I ever had that had any depth about fashion was I wanted to understand you working in fur.
Yeah.
And that was sort of the end of it.
Yes.
But I wanted you to talk a little bit about how you end up transitioning into dressmaking, because as the story, as I remember it, was PETA kept attacking your storefront.
Mm-hmm.
And so you made a couple dresses just to put in the window to keep people from attacking your store.
Yeah, it was, I mean, the story is that when I opened Madison Avenue, my first boutique, finally, even though I have to say, having windows on Fifth Avenue at Elizabeth Arden was quite something, but when I opened my first boutique, yes, everybody said, you're crazy, they're going to break your windows, you're not going to last more than a week. So the first thing I did, there was a little coffee shop next to my store called Viande, still there, little tiny place. I took a studio, a 200 square feet little studio above, put 2 machines, and I started to make little dresses. So I thought at nighttime, instead of leaving the furs, which are going to break the windows, I'll put a coat and a dress to match, a little matching thing, and see what happens. And then the next day, the being in the 60s on Madison Avenue, around there were ladies passing by and seeing my dresses and started to come in. So I said, wow, this is really amazing. I can really this is really working. And it created the attention of a lot of people, inclusive Bergdorf Goodman, who, when they saw that, I was moving on Madison Avenue and I was doing these fur trim pieces, cashmere coats with match. They came to me as well. And that's how I started even to open my own store at Bergdorf.
Because it eventually intersects into how we know each other.
Yeah.
How did you fall in love with my wife's mother, Jenny?
Oh, gee.
But how did you guys meet? Because, as the story goes, my mother-in-law is a bit of a Taiwanese princess, who, born in Taiwan, but end up living in Los Angeles. How did you and Jenny meet? Because I actually don't know that story.
You don't? Okay. Well,
do you want to tell that story?
Yeah, I mean there was a club in New York called O Bar. On the uptown, like an uptown club, and a friend of mine, took me there one night and we were dancing and so on. I saw this beautiful woman that was there, beautiful little Chinese doll. She was gorgeous. And very simply, I connected. And for a while we dated, but, there was nothing very serious. And one day I had a problem with my back and I had to have surgery of my lower back. And I didn't want to see anybody. I went to the hospital. I said the night before, I don't want to see anybody. You don't want to be bothered and so on. And this woman out of the blue came, I remember, like a Chinese delivery. She delivered to me at 8 p.m. at night before, food from the most delicious place in New York City. And I thought to myself, this is really someone amazing. She went through all this effort, even to do that. And I got invited, I married her.
So back to fashion. Obviously, I get to see it behind the scenes a bit, and I hear about it every day, which is a different thing. But so talk a little bit about the date, because I think coming in from the outside, not knowing much about fashion, I mean, I intersected with fashion houses through being famous in the 90s, but it was always kind of a show up and somebody lets you look around a bit kind of thing, or gives you a coat. But I think the most shocking thing for me coming in from the outside and basically marrying into a fashion dynasty is the day-to-day grind of the fashion business. So for people who don't know about the fashion business but are curious, talk a little bit about the day-to-day grind of what it is. Like the seasonal calendar.
I mean, fashion is the
word I would use is relentless. It seems to me from the outside, and I thought the music business was bad. The fashion business is very punishing. It's sort of really relentless.
Yes, definitely. No, it's really, really hard. You have to, you normally have 4 collections a year to present, spring, resort, fall, I mean, you can't, there's always something, bridal, you constantly do collections. You have to, you have to recreate all the time something new. I mean, I always felt I think fashion is really hard because if you think of it, if I was designing furniture and I'm successful at it, you repeat that piece of furniture forever because it's a classic. In fashion, it doesn't work that way. Once a woman wears, those dresses, you need already to change to a new style.
So is that the drive for innovation in it? Because I don't really understand it even to this point. It's always about what's the new thing for the crowd that's buying?
Not in my world, but in the world in the most mass market world, yes, it is. You have to constantly move on and bring some newness, constantly so that, it appeals for the store to buy. The stores, why would they buy something if they had it already before? So you constantly have to recreate something in order to create attraction.
Can you at least, again, for those that wouldn't know it, can you define a little bit about that kind of class of mostly women, obviously, but men too, but I don't know what you call them, the wealthy couture class or the fashion groupies, I don't know what you call that group of people, but there's a group of people who drive the biggest fashion houses in the world to innovate in the couture end of the thing.
Yes.
Because it's about creating buzz and vibe and who's on the ascendancy. Can you talk about that?
I'm not sure I fully understand. When you do runway, I mean, most of the companies create runways in order to, to show newness in their collection, to bring some new styles. Yeah. Today, we're living in a world, obviously, where everything is, mediatically shown to the world quickly through social media and so on. So they have, there is a huge industry behind the showing of the collections to find, to have the celebrities, promote them, so that the celebrities promoting them create desire for the people in them, to follow social media to buy it.
But I'm also talking about the woman in Dallas who's married to a billionaire who will buy, $100,000 couture piece because she wants to be the only person in the world.
Yes. I'm surprised. I don't see it that way.
Tell me if I'm wrong, but I'm surprised that element of society also drives the fashion messaging as well. Maybe it's not as public as the celebrity.
I don't think
Vogues.
it's as public as the celebrities.
But I'm saying behind the scenes.
But behind the scene, it's a huge.
Okay, that's what I'm after.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, this is the crowd that I'm following, for example, with House of Gilles. But this crowd is sometimes more low key than you think because they follow the brands. They see the extravaganza of the brands, but at the end, they want something bespoke, unique. They spend a lot of money. But the money they spend is also for they get something extraordinary, exclusive for them that has a lot of.
But to the average American, and I grew up as an average American, lower middle class.
Yeah.
These figures that you hear thrown around. Somebody paid.
A few $100,000 for a dress.
Yeah.
I mean,
if you go to by the way, wear it one time.
Yes.
That's shocking to most people in the West.
Yeah,
that's not to put it on you because that's the business that exists. It exists with or without you.
Yeah. But I mean, the value of what they buy, they're spending, there's a lot of work put behind. It's really one of a kind. There's a whole atelier.
I can attest to that. The amount of hours that goes into
there is value to it. It's not a hype compared to many other things in fashion that I could call more of a hype.
Sure.
Because, the markup between something that is made cheaply and sold, highly priced.
If you go into one of these fashion houses and you buy with the logo,
that is correct.
You're buying basically a $100 parka.
That is correct.
That somebody's charging 50 times markup.
Because all the money that they are spending in advertising and promoting and fashion shows and designers.
Well, also that you're buying the vibe.
Correct.
So you build Gilles Mendel up to the point where it's a multi-million dollar company. You have at some point a billionaire investor come in. What was the biggest sort of period of time for Gilles Mendel? When you were running it?
I mean, up to when, during the time, up to, I remember, when we do a couture show in 2016, where your wife, my daughter, came to Paris with me and we started it was a lot of fun. I mean, there was really heights. I loved it. It was a very extraordinary experience for me because, I like to do everything. So for me, at Gilles Mendel, it was, from the windows. I love doing windows. So, doing the windows on on Madison Avenue was really my joy. For a while in Paris, we had a store and I would do the windows as well. And, I got the best compliment because I always remember Albaz. Albaz was a designer of Lanvin, and he always made the most fabulous windows on Faubourg Saint-Honoré in Paris. And one day I'm walking, and this man walked, and we met. He knew me, I knew him, and he came to me and said, "Gilles, I love your windows." And it's like from a master saying that to me, made me really happy because I enjoy this experience. I enjoy the window making. I enjoy when you're in the store, meeting the customers, listening to their, there's something about it. So when I did this for a long time and I really enjoyed it and it was fun, but it became also more and more becoming, something less personal as you grow. You make more products, you can't control all the product, and I like to control what I do. I like to put, I have this imprint in me of this artisany, of this love of the product, respect of the product, which is really what I learned from my father and my grandfather. And I wanted to go back to that. And I think, there was a point after 2016, and then when COVID came in, a few
there
years
was also
later,
the economic.
Yeah, there was an economic situation that, lowered, became also more difficult.
Yeah.
But I would say most of it was, this desire to move on, really to do something that I really love and go back to the roots of something that I enjoy. And, in addition to what, it's such a family, experience having my daughter joining me and was, it's extraordinary. It's nothing more extraordinary than that.
Yeah. Okay. So speaking of your daughter.
Uh-oh.
So around 2012, I show up in your life.
Yes, I remember that.
So let's talk about that a bit.
Well,
I'll put you on the spot a bit.
Yeah, you do. I'll be very honest,
Please.
When somebody said Smashing Pumpkin, I say, what? I had no idea, Then
to be fair, when somebody told me Gilles Mendel, I didn't know what the hell they were talking about. So we're even on that score.
I always remember my daughter took me to a little tea house downtown, and she wanted to talk to me, and she said to me, Dad, I think I want to, I don't think I'm staying in that school, the Art Institute. I met somebody, and I think he lives in this place, and she tells me about, this mansion on the lake, kind of freaky, kind of, what the hell is that? This Adler, David Adler's house, and all these details, very dark, it's like, okay. Then she started to describe you a little bit more, and, I said, okay, I didn't know who you were. So it was like, I said, how old is he?
Yeah.
Oh, he's kind of a bit older. So I said, Chloe, why don't you just don't go crazy, come back to New York. We spend all the time, but she was so decided. She really wanted to stay in Chicago. So I knew that I had very little chances to convince her. And I always remember, I went back home and I say, what the hell? What is my daughter doing? I cannot believe it. I started to look in the internet who you were, and that became even worse. I saw some of the women you dated prior to my daughter, and I said, what the hell is going on here? I cannot just believe it. It was like a world, a completely different world, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
So I said, what is Chloe finding so attractive about this man?
I asked myself the same question.
I know if you remember, we had a call together.
Oh, I remember.
Oh, that call was so incredible. You are the perfect person to talk to when you have these kind of issues, because whatever you said to me, I didn't understand. It was another Andy Warhol moment for me. You spoke to me so well, so eloquently. You persuaded me. You could have said I was saying yes to everything you were saying, because it was like I had no argument about nothing. You made me, I cracked up. But anyway, yes, I freaked out. For a while, I was kind of worried, and but you turn out to be an incredible person.
Thank you.
And
I love you too.
Yeah, no, but it's extraordinary.
But back to that conversation, since we're talking about it openly.
Openly.
Well, your concern at the time was that your daughter would not fulfill her dreams.
Correct.
And the thing I remember telling you on that phone call, and we didn't really know each other much at that point, was just, I don't want somebody who's just going to sit at home. I want somebody who's I can be proud of and is successful. So
yes, but in those days, looking back and knowing who you were at that time, or at least from what I could read,
I was a mess. So I
that's what I'm saying. It was hard for me to. You could say whatever you were saying.
I think the thing we could say, and I would say it in if somebody was interviewing me, I would say it the same as I'm saying it to you. Is your daughter, my wife, is such an extraordinary person.
Mm-hmm.
She's changed both of our lives.
Yes,
and I think it's a testament more to her than to me.
Yes, definitely.
So that's where I'm blessed, And
I'm blessed
and you're my father-in-law, so I got you in the deal too, which was awesome.
Thank you.
So let's back to business here.
Well, she's in business now with me, so back to business.
But we got to go back. We got to go back a little bit, because it gets into the fur issue as well.
Okay.
I think she told me 20 Maison Atia started, you and Chloe with an investor,
Yeah.
friend of yours,
Yeah.
Caddy Maison Rouge.
Yes.
You guys started Maison Atia, which was a faux fur
business.
brand.
Yes.
I loved it because I thought, what a cool way to continue the great tradition of the Mendels in fur, but avoid, of course, the and I remember us having a conversation, and maybe it's a good time to bring it up. It's not to convince people of why fur should still be in the fashion business, because you've gotten out of fur, right? So that's not, it's not an ethical issue for you at this point. But I remember you talking very eloquently about, I guess I asked you a question, which is, what's the most positive way to look at fur in fashion, if there is still a place for fur in fashion? Is that something you want to speak on, or are you at a point now where you think that ship has sailed? In essence, is there an ethical place for fur in fashion? I guess that's the most challenging question I would ask you.
Yeah, it's really a challenging question because, it's been, I mean, you cannot, it's a subject that can be endless my response is, I don't know what to say, because in one hand, talking about sustainability and all this, obviously there's a lot of hypocrisy about talking about faux fur that is made of chemicals and all that stuff when you think about fur, which is autogradable. It's a small industry, it's a tiny industry, it's not really, but animal cruelty is an issue, and, there's nothing I can fight about that. And I have to say, in some ways, everybody, it's understandable that there could be issues on that. But it's a small thing. It's a small business. It was never, I don't know. To me, it's, I was a diamond cutter and the diamond became radioactive. And today I am not cutting diamonds anymore. That's where I stand.
Yeah.
And honestly, I had bigger vision because I felt like, I had such a desire to be in fashion, and fashion is not just fur by itself. Fur to me is a beautiful product. I mean, it's extraordinary, and if it's treated with respect, understanding, and, there's no reason why it should have been totally, destroyed and had to disappear. There's room for it, but
you've accepted it as sort of a kind of
But I accepted the fact that we can also live without, if that's that where the world is going.
Yeah, it seems to be that's where the world is going. But
I'm confused where the world is going, but that's a different subject.
That's a different subject.
That's a different subject.
For a different interview.
Yes.
So Maison Atia lasted about 5 years or so, but part of the challenge was you guys were actually getting traction.
Yes.
Or doing quite well. And then the pandemic kind of wiped that business out.
Yes.
So the silver lining in that is that you and Chloe decided to start what is now House of Gilles.
Yes.
So tell people what House of Gilles is, because I'm part of that, because I'm part of the family. And
yes, I mean, House of Gilles is a beautiful new story, we started. I mean, it really started with this idea. First of all, when you were getting married with Chloe, we had to do this beautiful gown, obviously, for Chloe. And it was a start. I said to Chloe, and we discussed it, and we said, why don't we take this first step, this first stone? We're gonna initiate a couture house. I always dreamed to have a couture house. I always dreamed to bring back, the artisani, an atelier, a special atelier in New York City, which is something unique, and finding the right ingredients.
It's kind of funny that they don't really exist like they used to, right?
No, because it's a trade that many people, they're getting older. The people who really know how to sew, and the pattern makers at certain level, come from those houses of, European houses are very scarce in New York, in America. But, so Chloe and I, we felt like it would be such a great idea, to go back to the roots of the house.
But it was really inspired by her wedding dress.
Yes, the wedding dress was really the beginning. I thought, what a great way to show to the world that we're back on track with beautiful gowns. And obviously your wedding was beautiful. Chloe looked amazing. And it started like that. I did a dress for the Met Ball, and then Chloe and we said, okay, maybe let's set up a little place in New York, and let's be more serious and try to create a couture place where women could come and meet the designer, meet his daughter, who also is fully participant with the design and experience what couture can be in America. And I think it's, so far it's been an extraordinary experience.
It's a nice thing because when I try to explain what you and Chloe are doing, anybody I sort of say, hey, go to this Instagram page or check out these pictures, everybody has the same reaction, which is just like, wow. It's almost like they didn't know that level of craftsmanship was available,
Yeah. I mean, if you have seen today, we did a show. Today we presented a bridal collection in our little studio, but the reaction of everybody was the same thing all the time. Like, oh, how can this is happening in this studio? Those flowers, those lace detail.
Yeah.
It's all those hands, those we call petite main in French.
For people that wouldn't understand, and just give me an average, but on a bespoke gown, where somebody comes in and orders from you and Chloe a specific gown, mostly bridal, but also some celebrities have come in and asked for custom bridal, for Met Ball and things like this. So on a bespoke piece, what would be the normal amount of hours that would go into a bespoke piece? Can you give an estimate?
Well, it takes,
because it's kind of mind-boggling.
It takes for one dress, it takes about 2 to 3 months minimum to make it, by stages, because that's the whole experience. What's beautiful with Chloe is that we basically we give the customer that extraordinary experience where she comes in and we take her measurements, and then it progresses into we discuss her desires, her views, or her inspirations and so on, and we give her really a journey through this experience, which is fabulous. Chloe on that is really good in giving that expectations and give the woman, the client, going beyond her expectations in what we create.
When we were all in Paris together recently, we went to see that show about the House of Worth, which was like the original bespoke couture house in Paris, run by an English guy.
Yes.
I guess going back to like 1850s, but mostly they were making garments for the royals.
Yes, correct.
So basically what you offer, and this also goes into your family's tradition, fur,
100%.
You're offering basically the level of
couture and refinement and artisanry.
But that used to only be available to people in the royal class.
Correct.
Which is crazy.
Correct. And it's a trade that is, I try to revive these are things that when you don't have to be experienced in fashion to feel what's, the electricity, the magic of the place when you come to us.
Yeah.
Because you see it, beauty is beauty, there's nothing, you cannot change that.
Okay. Last round.
Uh-oh.
I wrote out these questions because I thought these sort of interesting because I want your sort of take. And you can go as long or short on them as you like. Okay. What's the future of fashion?
Wow, that's a deep question. I'm troubled because, it's not an easy answer to give you. The world today is changing so quickly that it's really hard to give you an answer because, fast fashion doesn't seem to go too well these days. There's a lot of issue, about it. I hope that the future, that's where I would look at it. I hope that the future, and I think it's going into more, sustainability and more quality oriented, less volume, less trash, less all these things. So I hope, the future, I don't see a very bright future.
Okay. If elegance and class is one side of the equation, what's the opposite side of the equation? Is it like what you said? Is it trash fashion? Is it disposable?
Yeah, it's disposable fashion. I mean, fashion that lasts, pieces that you buy and that there's so much waste. Because people buy things. I mean, now everything is so easily accessible. You can buy things by mail everywhere. You could buy. So it's very wasteful. So I think that. Hopefully, people will more and more appreciate quality and try to buy less, but products that are better made.
Yeah.
And, I mean,
we face similar dynamics in business in different ways. How do you compete as a house, the House of Gilles? How do you compete against these massive multinational corporations?
I think you don't compete. You're so unique that you are what you are in the time where you compete, meaning, I'm not looking to be the size.
I don't mean dollar to dollar.
Okay. Well, you can't compete with those big houses. You have to not even think about competing, because you can't. The power they have, in social media and in mediatically is so high, so big. The millions they spend on every, it's impossible. But you have your own voice, and you see we are really successful at it. So it means there is a place for uniqueness.
Why make the same argument in music?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
And I also make it with my wrestling company. There is a place for quality always.
Always.
Right. When people are coming to you, obviously they're coming to you, say, for a gown, but what are they really looking for? Are they looking for a personalized experience? Are they want to have something that they feel special and ownership of? Like, what's the most common thing that you see that people are really looking for at the foundation of...
They really, I think they're really looking for first of all, for good advisors. They want to feel, they're looking for, when they come to us, obviously, they meet the designer who has, a past of making very beautiful, but also very feminine, and a certain aesthetic. So when they come to us, they're looking for maybe a vision of themselves they haven't thought about. And I think that's what we can bring. We bring, we bring something more unexpected to them, because they just to look at you can go to a store, or you can have a stylist propose to you 65 different shapes of clothing and so on. And when you meet really the designer who makes those clothes, and he has his vision to, based on your inspiration, your ideas, the fun part is really to give them, a different variation, a different vision of themselves. Yeah. Wouldn't you want to have this? I would die if someone to do that for me. I'd love to come someplace. They could say, Gilles, enough of your, of this look. Why don't we propose you? And that's what we do. And I think it's
maybe that's what I need to do. I need to give you my version of your look.
Please do. We could do that. We could flip one night.
Oh my God, I'd be so scared. It'd be like trying to cook for a master chef.
No. No, but it's fun to do that. It's really, it's extraordinary, because people come to us and they have this they get excited. They see the transformation.
Yeah.
And, now with the iPad, you could, I draw on an iPad, and I have this stupid program. Basically, I do old-fashioned.
Yeah, I've seen it where you can literally show somebody what it will look like.
Basically, I make a picture of you, and I start to dress you while you're there.
No, I've
and
seen them.
It's so much fun.
Okay, one last question, and then one little story that I want to tell.
Okay.
Do you have a vision? Because my wife is your business partner. We talk a lot about what House of Gilles would become. And I don't say it in some self-serving commercial way. I say it in the sense of, like, as entrepreneurs, the vision of what you hope a business can become, where you're putting your passion and you're putting in those extra hours and you're dealing with the bullshit of it that anybody in business deals with. What for you is the vision for House of Gilles in terms of growth, like past what you're doing? And what you're doing is amazing, but as you and I know, that's not a sustainable path past a certain point.
Yes.
Because you're always fighting the headwinds of change, trend.
Yes. It's a core, it's a base. If you look at all those big houses, those famous houses, they always keep couture somewhere. So couture is the base. It's like basically, it's kind of creates a legitimacy of the house. Chanel, does couture. They also acquire all this little atelier in Paris where they do the feather work, where they do.
Okay.
So, couture is like what makes, to my point of view, is create the legitimacy of the house.
I see.
And then from there, you develop the ready to wear. So I think that couture for us is really makes us so unique in our own ways that ultimately we can either find later on more collaborations, we can find other ways to expand, because we have this prestigious image about us, whether perfume, whether it's unique.
I love that.
It's unique.
Well, I went in on the perfume division. So last story, and I'd say it to hopefully make you laugh. You were working on something custom for me.
Mm-hmm.
And as you guys do, you're tugging and you and Chloe are arguing about the buttons.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sitting there and I'm like, I want to be anywhere else on the planet than having you guys tug on me and argue about the buttons. And I started grousing as only a husband can about, do I have to sit here and listen to you guys talk about the buttons? And my wife, your daughter, turned to me and said, we care just as much about the buttons as you care about the way your songs sound in the studio. Why do you sit in the studio all day and fuss over a guitar sound? And for the first time in my now 13-year relationship with your daughter, I understood that it's just as important to you as those guitar tones are to me.
Yes.
And in reverse, and I say this in fellowship, I don't know why I care so much about the damn guitar sound. Because you could argue after about an hour, any sound after that's pretty good.
Yes.
But why do I have to do it for 3 hours? What is that little thing, that little advantage, that little thing that says, no, this is my signature.
Yes.
So I feel like I understand, and
it's exactly
maybe it
that.
brought us a little closer together.
No, 100%.
Did you have fun?
Yes, of course I did. Good to see you,
Thank
Billy.
you. Love you.
I love you.